KNOLSKAPE's recent L&D survey report for 2025 trends presents a unique paradox. While leadership skills are being ranked as a top priority for organizations, the lowest budget allocation for training is for leaders. Intriguing, right? Hello, everyone. This is Rajiv Jayaraman, the founder and CEO of KNOLSKAPE, and I welcome all of you to another episode of the Learning Curve powered by KNOLSKAPE. And today, I have the perfect person to talk about leadership development and the paradox that we just spoke about. Anser Aly, Head of Global Learning and Leadership Development at Unilever. Anser is an award-winning L&D professional and a three times Cannes Lion winning marketer with 25 years of international expertise in building and growing multiple billion-dollar brands. Anser has held a variety of senior, global, regional, and local roles in multiple Fortune 500 companies such as Shell, Deloitte, Henkel, and Unilever. His expertise extends to marketing, training, and capability building. Based out of Unilever's London headquarters in his previous role, Anser had the responsibility of training and upskilling more than 6,000 Unilever marketers worldwide. Anser has also been a mentor to multiple startup founders, helping them perfect their pitches to VCs for fundraising successfully via his famed pitch clinics. Anser has also been invited as a guest lecturer at various top tier B schools, including Chicago Booth, London Business School, Singapore Management University, and most recently, Harvard. Hi, Anser. Welcome to the Learning Curve.
Hi, Rajiv. Delighted to be here, and thanks for the very glowing introduction.
Before we move to the discussion, I have a quick rapid fire section for you. Are you ready?
So you're going to put me to the test straight away. Let's go.
Absolutely. No pressure. So, the most memorable feedback you've ever received?
Wow. Okay, that does throw me off. I am a stickler for feedback, and honestly, I believe that feedback is not something that happens or should happen in annual appraisals, but it's more about everyday situations. And every time I finish a training, I'm usually going line by line on any of the feedback forms that we receive. And I think the most memorable feedback is one that tells you where the gaps are, other than, of course, everything that's working well. And in this case, it was just humbling to know that at times when you feel everything is perfect, you never know if there are 150 people in the room. Somehow, someone may get triggered by something. And this was by a lady who was reacting to an image that was shared on the screen. This wasn't even me presenting at the time, but I searched for feedback anytime and all the time. It was a different presenter. But that lady had had a personal experience related to the incident that was being used as an analogy. And that reminded me that, hey, one has to be very cognizant of other people's experiences. And the sad thing was when the lady out of 150 people even raised her hand and said, look, this does bring back certain memories because I have been in this precarious situation. I'm deliberately not repeating that incident. The gentleman just went on and didn't even, he said, oh, all the better. In that case, tell us how it felt. And later on, she disclosed that she actually went for therapy post that incident. So I think in that case, it's just about being more sensitive to what's there. And I'm not sure if this is what you were looking for in terms of a glowing feedback, but certainly this was something that awakened my awareness to an even higher degree.
Absolutely. Empathy is at the core of it, right? So people look at anything from a different perspective. So ability to connect the dots and understand where they are coming from to create a shared understanding. Awesome. I love that answer. A quote you live by.
Oh, I have a few. Can I share two? They're both related.
Yeah, go for it.
And I keep repeating these even to my kids. The first one is uh, think big, start small, scale fast. And I really believe in this. I mean, really think big. And related to that is if your dreams are not scaring you, you're not dreaming big enough. So
Wow.
that's why I believe really think big, but then start small. You got to start somewhere. You can't be lost in the clouds. And then once you know it works, then scale fast.
I love that. So the next one is your go-to activity for a creative reset.
So if I have time, Rajiv, I will take a walk. And I have these favorite spots typically closer to the places I visit or I live. I'm very fortunate to live by the beach in Singapore. So I literally would go down and before sunset, take a walk. And somehow nature is a great stimulant.
Yeah.
It serves as, it sparks off many thoughts. If I don't have time, then I know that my creativity can be stirred by um, literally the first three sips of my coffee when it's still warm. And therefore, I get very deliberate. I never sort of lose that moment. I make sure that when I'm having the first three sips of my coffee, I'm thinking about something that I've been trying to resolve or rejoice about.
Awesome. I read this line somewhere. Sometimes it's the coffee that stirs you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nice one. I haven't heard that
Yeah.
before, but nice.
Next one that I have on the list is one myth about leadership development you'd like to debunk.
That the magic happens in the room. So
Ah,
people
right.
think there's a magic wand. I'm going to show up at 9, 9:15, walk in, saunter in, and then somehow I'll be reformed and changed and completely by 5 p.m. No, garbage in, garbage out. So I just feel that there's so much that depends on the success of a program or any learning intervention, both before, in the lead up to, and after. And therefore, I think the myth is that you can't just rely on how amazing or not the facilitator or the speaker or whoever's the anchor on the day is. It really depends largely on the person's own mindset as a learner. And I think the largest myth is not, hey, who do you have for me today? What are their credentials? No. What is your mindset? Are you really coming
Right.
in to find gaps or are you coming in to close the gaps that you have?
Awesome. I love that. The next one, the last one on the list is one movie you can watch any number of times.
Oh, wow. So I'm thinking because I'm not really a movie buff. I find it very difficult to absorb myself in movies, but I'm more into serials. I'm more
Okay.
into soaps because that's easier for me to then, once I'm into the characters, then I follow it. My all-time favorite is an old one. Many of your viewers may not be aware of it. It's called Lost. And I
Lost. Yeah.
literally got lost watching it. I loved it. It was really good. And the other one from more recent times is Manifest.
Okay.
And
Yep.
Manifest was so good, Rajiv, that I had to literally pull myself back and stop watching it. After season two, it was really getting into messing my brain. I was so involved with the characters, so I literally had to stop watching it. It's that good.
Yeah, I haven't watched that one, but I'll look it up. Great.
It's on
That was a
Netflix.
wonderful rapid fire section. Thank you so much for your candid answers, Answer. We'll now move to the actual discussion, and I have a bunch of questions lined up for you. You've had an extraordinary career. When I look at your profile, your career spans 25 years. Although looking at you, I can't tell. It's been that long. You know, maybe you can tell us what you have for breakfast. From a fitness standpoint. Yeah, career spanning 25 years across diverse markets and industries. What is super interesting for you is the transition you made from being a three times Cannes Lion winning marketer to becoming a global learning and leadership development professional. How did that transition come about?
So I'll give you a short answer and then I'll follow it up. The short answer in one word, and in fact, it's one of the words on your background, Rajiv, it's purpose. That's my one word answer. But then just to explain that a little bit, to be honest, I was a very happy and fulfilled marketer. After being in what I call an accidental marketer for the longest part of my career, I made a very deliberate shift to embracing L&D as a full-time career choice. And the reason was purpose, because several years ago, almost 9 or even 10 years ago, I attended this amazing workshop. So, see, it all goes back to learning. It was called the Discover Your Purpose Workshop, and it's very popular at Unilever. More than 55,000 employees globally in Unilever have taken this
Wow.
workshop. I was merely one of them. But it had such a deep and lasting impact on me, Rajiv, that the workshop does literally what it says. You enter the room at 9, and by 6 p.m., you leave with clarity on what your purpose is. And that day, which was nearly 10 years ago, I realized what sparks my joy, and that ignited something in me. So while I was a very happy and fulfilled marketer by day, it triggered a parallel journey for me. So by evening, I was trying out everything possible. So I was a marketer by day, but by evening, I was a facilitator, trainer, speaker, guest lecturer, mentor, coach. And after having all those experiences for several years and being a stickler for feedback, also seeing the impact or lack of, finally, I realized that, listen, marketing may be my first love, but here's something where the impact on the canvas is far bigger and far deeper. So I decided to make a very late shift in my career, which was could have been quite risky, but it's proved well. And I've never looked back since. I think I hold a lot of joy for marketing in my heart. And still, if you just have to say it twice, and I might jump for some brands that I still find very aspirational. So you can never take the marketer out of me. But L&D is where my purpose is. L&D is where I truly feel fulfilled. And I feel in this role, every hour of every day, I'm living my purpose.
Wow, that's so inspiring to listen to. Was there something specific in that workshop that sort of brought this clarity in your head, or was it you feel building up over a period of time?
A bit of both, Rajiv. So the workshop serves as a awakening moment. See, one of the best quotes, and by the way, as it happens, I now happen to be the global lead on employee purpose at Unilever. So after all
Wow.
these years, it's come back full circle, and I have the privilege and the pleasure of now hosting these workshops for thousands of our leaders every year. And the way I kick off these workshops, which gives the answer to your question, is the two most important days of anyone's lives are the day you are born and the day you discover why. Welcome to the day you discover why. So that's literally what happened, Rajiv. In a sense, you get clarity. You get a sense of, okay, what am I doing here? Why am I here? What brings me joy? What drives me? What gets me out of bed? But then it's an ongoing process. So even 10 years on, while the result has been very lasting and very sticky, every day is a new discovery. So I think what happened was that the workshop set me off in a new direction. But even if that direction was 1 degree, in a different direction, over a period of time through trial and error, experimentation, and putting myself in all those experiences, all those different roles that I shared as a facilitator, as a trainer, as a speaker, going to different business school campuses, as a coach, as a consultant, all those different roles brought even more clarity to me. And over the years, doing it and really pushing yourself and getting that experience then helps you decide what's next for you. So I think it's both the initial moment, the trigger, but then also persisting and trying things out because you're constantly growing, aren't you? Otherwise, you're not living, you're not learning.
Awesome. I love that. So that brought to my mind a video I watched of this person called George Brooks, an author, a columnist. He talks about the second mountain, right? Oftentimes, when we're growing up, there are certain things that we are told to do or we are expected to do. So you go through a certain um, set of degrees and programs that you go through. Maybe your first job is something that others wanted you to do, but there comes a time when you realize, I'm good at that, but maybe this is not the hill or the mountain that I wanted to climb in the first place. But then you climb down that mountain before you can climb the next one. So there is a valley you get into, which is very uncomfortable. So as you got into that valley yourself, was there anything that you had to start doing differently, stop doing, or continue doing? This is a classic start, stop, continue, because that transition is very beautiful.
So I love the analogy of the mountains that you mentioned, and it's important to keep moving because otherwise your vantage point doesn't change and your views don't change. In my case, firstly, I was very lucky that I was privileged to actually experience a lot of success and a lot of things that I tried. But to answer your question more precisely, the one shift I did have to make, or the one adjustment I had to make, was during the COVID period. And that happened in two ways. One is I started off in marketing, which is my first love, and all my training and the boot camps were marketing related. Then slowly during period, a lot of people were rethinking their careers. I got requested by a lot of partners that I was working with to move into career development and have some career related or even leadership related topics. So I started designing my own courses on those topics. So that was something new, purely organically through demand, not something that was planned. And thank goodness that led to what I'm doing now, because I realized while I was getting a lot of joy from marketing related trainings, I was meeting a very small iota of people. And there's a far bigger canvas to impact, because functional skills can only take you so far. When you hit the metaphoric glass ceiling, it's the leadership skills that make all the difference when you have to lead people. So that was one shift, and a nice one. The other one was what COVID all forced us all to do was to go stay indoors, and therefore the entire turning landscape inverted, and everything went virtual. And
Yeah.
that's where I realized, Rajiv, that my first virtual experience, which requires a lot of adjustment, my typical 2 hour session finished in 40 minutes. And I was horrified, and I was like, look, this content, typically I'm struggling to close it in 2 hours. And how come, boom, in 40 minutes? And then I realized the reason is most people don't have cameras on. And what happens is when you're in a room, you can read body language, you can look at
Yeah.
someone's puzzled face, you can pause, you can allow questions. But there was no one there to interrupt me or hold me back. I couldn't see anyone. So I just went full speed. And that requires a major adjustment to deliberately engage with people, ensure that you're allowing those pauses and those moments for people to interact with you, ask questions, don't wait for people to raise their first hand. So that allowed me to really adjust my style, and now I'm very comfortable, obviously so many years on, both in person. But the big learning is that one size doesn't fit all, so you really have to depend on how many people in the room. Is it
Right.
virtual? Is it physical? What are the cultural nuances? So that's where I think my learnings and my adjustments came.
Oh, that's fantastic. One of the books I want to read this year, it's on my reading list, is Digital Body Language. I thought it was
Nice.
a fascinating title. Somebody recommended that to me as well. And it's a needed skill for all of us, right? We spend so much time in a Teams meeting or a Zoom call, and this is extremely important to read the sentiment on the other side. Great. I love that response. So I want to go back to the survey that the report that we've published, right, on L&D predictions for 2025 from KNOLSKAPE, learning in the age of Gen AI. So that's the major theme that we are going after for the year. Um, we've had some very interesting observations in the survey, and the fact that I was referring to earlier, while leadership skills are being ranked as a top priority for organizations, when it comes to budget allocation, it finds itself in the bottom rung. Why do we see this paradox between desire and intent, or intent and will? Why is there such a big difference?
No, thanks for calling out the survey, and that's such a insightful and very factual learning. I think the answer in two words, Rajiv, is patience and measurement, and actually the lack of both. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is, first of all, we're all impatient. So a lot of organizations, as we say in my language in Urdu, we all want paki pakai roti. Nobody
Yeah,
wants to get the dough, make the dough, develop
right.
leaders. You'd rather buy something than take a year or two to, or have the patience to really nurture talent and develop leaders. So I think it's that we're in that age, that disposable age, where you hire and fire, or you just use
Hmm.
something and you move on. So very few companies would really have that long-term view of putting in place everything that's required to develop leaders. So I think it's that impatience. And the second thing is lack of measurement, because here I would hold the lens back to now L&D professionals like myself, Rajiv, and we're all in the same space,
Yeah.
where I think partially we should search for that transference of how can we make it so tangible? Because leadership development
Yeah.
is seen to be something that you can't immediately show results. You can't quantify it. It's not even the closest you can come to that is sales training, where you hope results
Yeah.
will come through. So I think over time, if we can really show the delta, if we can show the before and after, if we can show the difference a leadership intervention can make, more and more organizations will then be inclined to invest behind it, both in terms of time, resource, and money. So I think it's a bit of both of these reasons that we see this dichotomy.
Awesome. Patience and measurement. I'll remember that. So,
And the lack of
as
growth.
part of your profile, we understood that you trained 6,000 marketers worldwide, and that's a monumental task, right? The scale at which this happened. What strategies or frameworks did you use to scale learning and development, right? That's the first one. And were you able to measure the impact? What sort of needle movement did you observe as part of this?
It's a great question. I'm smiling because you're throwing the challenge back at me for measurement. So yes, this does go back a few years, Rajiv. So I was doing this role between 2009 and 2012. So that's feels ancient now, but
Mm,
definitely the challenge was nonetheless there, and I think the principles are the same. So I think the one shift that I brought about when I was in this role, and because I was from the business, I was not a career learning person. I was a marketer myself. I sort of knew what the real problem was and what we needed to solve. And for that, it really boils down to the value that you add, the benefit that you bring, regardless of what you're doing. So the one shift that I brought about was to try and solve real problems.
yeah.
So yes, bring in inspiration, bring in case studies. That's as far as a lot of people were doing. But what I did was I took it a step further. I basically ditched the theory and I started showcasing, not only showcasing best practice, but allowing people to bring in their life problems and we solve them. And that was a guiding principle, Rajiv. Now, the format used to change. So, with that in mind, first of all, then in the day when Zoom was not the norm, almost a decade ago, I introduced what we used to call live calls at the time, or I used to
Yeah.
define them that. And live calls were basically your opportunity to come in with your real problems. And I would typically be there with another expert and we would try and solve it there and then. And that was quite a daring ask because you're putting yourself out there and you
Yeah.
just don't know. And these were global live calls. So, and we would do twice. I was based out of London, so we would do twice in the day, one in the afternoon to cater to the Americas, and then one in the morning for Asia. And in these, we would typically get a few hundred Unilever marketers dialing in. And slowly we saw that because people saw the value, and these were authentic answers, not made up
Right.
answers, uh, people were participating quite heavily. The other thing I started doing was live clinics, what I used to call for marketers. So again, this was quite innovative for the time because we would have workshops, we would have courses, but this was where I would welcome marketers to come in with their marketing strategy or whatever they wanted to discuss. And then we would sort of have these short live clinics to again brainstorm how to make this better. And the last thing was this whole concept of live action workshops. This again was a very novel idea, and this is where I'll address your question on measurement. I haven't forgotten. And the novelty here was, Rajiv, that live action workshops were about Unilever launches and how to make them bigger. So if you, Rajiv, were leading a project or a brand, I will invite you to bring in not only yourself, but your cross-functional team members. So your supply
Okay.
chain colleague, your R&D colleague, your finance colleague, and that deliberate attempt of having in one room focused time for all cross-functional partners to focus on one brand's launch gave us a huge results. And this is where we were able to measure. So I can give you a number. We did 100 of these workshops during my time, and the ROI was close to 50 million euros incremental turnover.
Wow.
That is the
Okay.
value of, and how we measured it was the ideas that were generated in the workshop. If they were implemented post-launch, then how much incremental turnover did they bring? As an
Understood. Yes.
aggregate, they brought around the worth of 50 million euros. So we could really pin down 6 months after the workshop, we could say, hey, this workshop generated X amount. So the ROI or the measurement was clearly there. Even if you forget everything else, team morale and all the synergies and sometimes the time savings we made in fast tracking things, just purely in terms of incremental turnover. So those were the three things: live calls, live clinics, live action workshops, but all based on the principle of solving real problems.
Awesome. And talking about scale, we at KNOLSKAPE do a lot of things at scale. The one advice that I often offer to L&D professionals is to infuse some marketing principles into learning and development, because ultimately it's a product, it's a solution for which you need takers, right? It's important for employees to go through it. Sometimes in the thick of all the activities that they are into, they don't find the time for it. How do you market your program? So, what has been your experience in using your background in marketing for driving adoption of learning at scale? Because the industry suffers from that, right? Many learning platforms we deploy in the organization only to find that maybe 5% of our addressable audience is even signing up for the platform. Anything from your marketing experience you've been able to effectively deploy in learning and development?
Indeed, indeed, Rajiv. Brilliant question. And it's not just anything, it's everything. Because even in my L&D role, I operate like a marketer. I can't help, I think like a marketer.
Right.
And I think the fundamental shift is keeping the end user in mind.
Yeah.
So exactly like you said, using the marketing principles, design around the end users. I'm always imagining that one person sitting at the back of the room, or if it's a digital intervention, then who's the lowest common denominator? So you're end of the day designing for that person, not for the stakeholders, not for anything else. And if it works with that one individual, it'll work for everyone. Because they say if you design for everyone, you design for no one. So that's the
Right.
first thing. So keep the end user in mind. And the second thing is when you specifically about how do you market it? Because if the traction is low, even if you build a monument, but nobody's coming to see it, what's the point? So again, keeping the end user in mind, the advertising or the marketing or the communication for the training has to be all around the benefit led. There's this classic marketing thing about feature led
Right.
versus marketing led. So if it's a classic washing machine, and if you talk about the RPMs and how it nobody understands that jargon. But if you speak to the average how person who uses the washing machine in their language, that look, remove stains even at 15 degrees or in a shorter wash, that's when it makes sense. So the science has to serve the end benefit, not the other way around. So therefore, I always call out what's the end. You may be having, often we make the mistake in learning to shout out the frameworks or something amazing, the solution that we found out, but what's the problem it's solving? So the solution can come within the training, but the headline has to be, if I'm a marketer, if I'm an R&D person, if I'm a salesperson, what will I get by investing
Yep.
the time that you're asking me to invest? So I think speaking the language of the end user and then revealing the solution during the session is fine. And finally, the last thing I would say is, again, a very basic thing, but we forget. A lot of my L&D, it's timing. A lot of my L&D colleagues say that, hey, it's difficult to people not distracted, and
Yeah.
nobody can stay away. Well, if it's salespeople and you're forcing them to come to a training in the last week of the month, clearly they will be distracted. They're
Right.
hitting numbers at that time. So just be cognizant of who it is, when is a good time, time of day, time of week, time of year. Simple rules like that, keeping the end user, the end consumer in mind, makes all the difference.
Awesome. I love that. So at Knowledge, we speak in terms of future of work and the three W's that go along with the future of work, worker, and the workplace, right? So today we are witnessing how work is getting futurized. Worker or the employee needs a personalized approach. One size does not fit all these days. And then the workplace needs to be humanized. Right. So in this context, I have three questions for you for futurizing, personalizing, and humanizing. So as the head of Unilever's Global Learning Center, how are you driving the futurization agenda in alignment with what's going on with AI and digital and so on? How is Unilever preparing its leaders and the workforce to meet the demands to futurize?
So I love that. I love that dimensionalization of work, worker, workplace, and then futurize, personalize, humanize. It's a tough question, but let me try. So, see, essentially, again, one size doesn't fit all. So there are several approaches we are taking here to achieve all those three things. First is a skills-based approach. And what I mean by a skills-based approach is that not for everyone, not across the board, because that will again be a mistake. We don't need to shift like a pendulum, reject everything we know works, and then move to an extreme, but with certain communities within the business. So let's say the sales community, and even within sales, not everyone, but there's this certain sales community that we have highlighted, which plays a big role between the customer and Unilever. That's where we've come up with a very skills-based approach where we've designed a bespoke program. And what we've done here, Rajiv, which is different, is once we piloted it, and this was one of the first assignments I had, and we saw that it works, we introduced this terminology called license to operate, which means
Mhm.
we know this works. Again, to measurement, we were able to actually tangibly measure the impact it has, and not from just anyone, but from the end customer, Unilever's customers, compared to our competitors, how our salespeople were performing, those who had taken this program and those who hadn't. But armed with that knowledge, armed with that clear measurement metric, we then made sure that this is your license to operate. So we actually had our CPO writing to every one of this community, a couple of hundred people globally, that if by 31st December you have not concluded this, I'm sorry, but literally your laptop will freeze by 1st January, or your
Okay.
systems will freeze. So a skills-based approach, and then piloting it to success, and then measuring it and making it mandatory. The other thing that we've done in order to personalize and humanize is democratizing coaching. So coaching is something we had
Right.
restricted to our very senior leaders, Rajiv, and it brings about brilliant awareness, self-awareness, and results. But we've now moved this year into digital coaching, and that's something where we are democratizing it to even the second and third layer of leaders.
Okay.
And I kicked off this program end of last year to close to 900 senior managers at Unilever, and the response has been phenomenal. And I'm just so glad that we're moving in a day and age where we're using digital technology to scale and take something like coaching, which is restricted 20 years ago. I wish I had coaching, but now to even those who are sort of mid-careers and not so senior. And the impact is phenomenal because it brings a lot of humility and awareness, essentially humanize, as you said.
Awesome. And is there a specific focus on building AI related skills?
There is absolutely. AI is something that everybody is very concerned about. So different teams are addressing this in different ways. It's a case of finding out who you are in the organization, where you sit, and therefore how could you really use AI to your benefit? Because we've all heard it's not AI that will replace us; it's someone who uses AI better
Right.
will replace us. So I think it's we're all going through this very fast learning curve on AI because it's changing so fast. But it's then addressing the question of, okay, I can either be anxious about what AI can do or will do in the future, or really what are those small changes I'm bringing in my daily role to really use AI to do my job better.
Awesome. I love that. And how are you personalizing learning experiences to ensure programs are aligned to not just the company's agenda and goals, but also to the individual's roles, domains, and their aspirations?
So here the way we're approaching this is in the past, Rajiv, we've have these very successful signature programs in Unilever that have for several years been working very well in little pockets and isolation across certain work levels, seniority levels, geographies. One of my projects is to bring these all together under a single identity and a single brand.
Okay.
So that's and the unique thing about this, which addresses your question around personalization, is that rather than having these pockets of excellence, again putting the user at the center, rather than having you attend different programs at different points in your career and none of them are connected. What if we shifted the focus to the end user, the employee themselves, and said typically from the point you join Unilever as a management trainee all the way to director and beyond, what if there was a program that followed you and was mapped around your career?
Nice.
And that's a
Hmm.
tough task because this could be a period of 10 years or more. But
Yeah.
that's exactly what I'm designing at the moment, where it'll be an end-to-end program that curves based on your career map, and it'll be 3 or 4 legged, but it'll have a single identity. And at different times in your career, in year 1, year 3, year 5, year 7, you will have access to this program. But then there will be some connectivity. We will know the early stages will be about leading yourself, then leading teams, then leading a certain part of the organization. So in that sense, there'll be a lot of structure and thinking that goes in, less of an overlap, less of confusion in terms of, okay, how does this, if I've done this program, where do I go next? So it's almost like a rite of passage and a graduation while you're working.
Nice. And in terms of building a culture of within the organization, right? Uh, in our experience, what we are finding is while technical training around AI or digital, that's relatively easier, but there is a larger issue of how do you build psychological safety or a sense of belonging in the workplace. Any experience in terms of how Unilever is looking at perhaps the L&D strategy to build psychological safety or the culture of belonging or the culture of experimentation, which is very critical these days. Anything that you can share on that front?
I'll give you a one-word answer: purpose.
Okay.
So psychological safety is really necessary, and we 2 or 3 years ago, Rajiv, we really doubled down on it, and we ensured that there was a specific learning intervention around psychological safety, which was sort of scaled across the company with a lot of success. And now there's a lot of people do refer to it, and there's a lot of understanding of what it means. Moving beyond that and building that sense of belonging, what Unilever has done beautifully is with purpose, because we really feel that we are grounded in purpose, not only as a company and several of our brands, but individuals who have their own personal purpose. Going back to that workshop I mentioned at the start,
Yeah.
Discover Your Purpose, it's still something we lead with a lot of passion in Unilever. I run many of those workshops myself. And the idea is we feel that it's not just a wishy-washy concept, but it actually helps. It has a direct link, believe it or not. Discovering your personal purpose eventually leads to business productivity and business
Right.
performance. And we've done some research in partnership with some um, professors on looking at with data how this causal relationship is. So we see that this is something worth investing in, and it's paid us huge dividends, because finding your personal purpose and then finding a way to live it at work. And I could be one perfect poster boy for that, where I've actually shifted careers. But even a lot of people don't need to do that. They tend to find meaning within their own role, within their own jobs. Once they are clear on what their purpose is, it ignites a lot of energy, a lot of
Yeah.
positive engagement, a lot of well-being, a lot of resilience. So that's one thing that's worked very well for Unilever for more than a decade, and it's something that we thankfully have not ditched, but we are continuing to take it forward.
Awesome. At some point in the future, when you offer this program to the outside world, I'm going to definitely sign up. It sounds super exciting. Now, looking at the FMCG as a space, right, today we know there are a lot of things that are playing out like sustainability, innovation, adaptability, and there's a lot of change happening in the environment. How do you see Unilever progressing through towards this vision of sustainability and innovation and adaptability? And what role do you think leadership will play in driving this evolution?
So, in my view, in my humble view, FMCG is about two things. It's about serving consumers, and it's about servicing customers, and doing both of these with speed. That's why it's fast moving consumer goods.
Yeah,
And by speed, I mean speed to market, but also speed in picking up future trends and then riding on those trends to drive behavior change. I think that's what FMCG essentially is about. Now, all of that requires innovation, it requires adaptability, like you said, but it also requires an eye for insights. And
yeah,
Unilever is a very insight-led, purpose-driven business, and we've been in this game for a long time, and thankfully managed to attain fairly market-winning positions in a number of brands in multiple geographies. But this constantly requires reinvention, and that's where leadership comes in, to your point, Rajiv. And thankfully, we are in that privileged position where, because we've invested in leadership development over the years, we are one of those few companies, I think, that still exists today that believes in the brick and mortar sort of model, where we've got not one but two global purpose-built learning centers, one in Singapore, one in London. And therefore, the benefit of investing consistently behind leadership development is that we are known to be a CEO factory or even a school of
Right?
marketing.
Yes.
In fact, when people ask me what university did I graduate from, my reply is I'm still learning and I'm still enrolled at the University of Unilever. So
Awesome.
every day is a learning day, both for me and as well as for everyone else at Unilever.
Super. And that leads me to the last question on my list. What is the one new thing that you've learned or tried in the last year, in 2024?
Interesting. So I'll give you two answers, one personal, one professional. On the personal side, I think for me personally, this was a real hard one. But one of the things I really pushed myself to do and try in last year, at the end of last year, was personal storytelling. And that's very different to, I've done lots of corporate talks, and there's no PowerPoint, there's nothing stiff about it, but this is about sharing a very deeply personal story on stage to a live audience.
Yeah.
And I did that at the end of last year, and in fact, it was a very personal moment of when I discovered my purpose, something we've spoken about briefly. So that precise moment in the workshop that brought that sort of aha moment in my head. So that's something that I had to really sort of reveal, something very personal, but in a very public way. So that's something new for me. It was very daunting at the start, but very gratifying when the audience sort of encourages you. So that was the personal new thing that I've learned this year. And now I'm more open to doing this in the future. On the professional side, Rajiv, I think it was a bit about trying the unknown and then finding success in it or making it successful. So I'll give you two examples. I was told that you cannot engage people virtually, and that's always a challenge. You can't do things as a physical roadshow anymore because that takes ages. We don't have the patience. So just last year, what I managed to do was design a workshop that was scaled to 17,000 senior leaders at Unilever, directors and above. But we did it in a very engaging way using Zooms, using breakout rooms. But even within those breakouts, we had role play. So that
Yeah.
really dialed up. It was a logistical nightmare, but we did it. So it can
Right.
be done. The other thing was I was told that something as emotional as this purpose workshop is a challenge for us because at any given point in time, I have got 500 people on the wait list, and I don't
Yeah.
have enough people to run this workshop, and the workshop can only be run in small groups of five. So I need one facilitator for every five people. So when I was tasked with this, I asked, how do we solve this? And it said, well, for 20 years, we just run more train the trainer sessions. And I thought that's not going to solve the issue. So as any good marketer, I flipped the problem on its head. And I said, okay, if the constraint is a facilitator, how if we imagine doing this workshop without a facilitator? So I've now successfully piloted this automated version where I've fully gamified it, but without diluting the end user experience. So I've literally elevated, not eliminated the facilitator by turning all participants into a facilitator as well. So now it's a fully gamified version and it can be scaled exponentially. So those are two things in the professional space where I think we tried something new and we proved the success there.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, oftentimes when you're trying to scale something up, the efficacy of what you're doing goes down. In pursuit of efficiency, we let go of efficacy. Sounds like you've basically resolved that trade-off between efficacy and efficiency there. So that's super interesting.
I did, and if I may just quickly add, it was just that clarity and that guiding principle of keeping the user at the heart of it. And I gave
Right.
myself two challenges, and I said, how will we measure success? So alpha beta testing
Yeah.
with every automated workshop, I ran a live workshop in person, traditional way. So we had comparable results, and success would only be if the automated version is just as good or better. So we can't
Right.
dilute the experience. But at the same time, thinking of the end user, I can't overburden you to run a train the trainer for you that Rajiv, you're coming to this one day workshop now. I need you for another half day to train you.
Right.
So it's about bite-sized learning and just in real time sharing what you need to do. So those were two guiding principles, and that ensures that efficiency does not take away efficacy.
Awesome. I love that. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. For every question I had, you had a brilliant answer. I remember the joke that you cracked when we met in person. These days, ChatGPT is challenging your position in your team meetings because it's giving you all the answers. So thank you so much, Answer, for this lovely chat. The insights and the experiences you shared were phenomenal. And I'm sure our listeners are going to benefit a great deal from this episode. Thank you so much once again. And thanks to all our viewers and listeners for tuning in to The Learning Curve. We shall be back in the next episode with another great personality and insights for making organizations and leaders future ready. Until next time, take care and goodbye.